You're listening to a Meatsmith Harvest. This is the podcast that encourages and equips you to grow your home around the harvest. This Farmstead Meatsmith production is made possible by you. If you like it, please consider supporting our team by going to patreon.com/Meatsmith and donating at a level you'd enjoy giving at. Your gift helps us increase the quality and quantity of all our free media education. Thank you, and happy harvesting. Hi, Meatsmith.
Cheers, Meatsmiths.
We are at it again, even though everything in our calendar is saying we don't have time for this. We want to.
Yeah.
It's a chance for us to get together, right?
Yeah. We actually wouldn't really get together very much at all unless you gave us the obligation to sit down and do a podcast. Not that you obligate us. We obligate ourselves to be obligated to you to do a podcast.
Which
on
we
a
enjoy.
semi-regular basis. Which is serendipitous because otherwise it wouldn't happen. See, I was in the middle of doing stuff.
You can see the...
That's a brine. It's cooling. Just made that. I got lard in the background. We're in the middle of processing what remains of our pigs, meaning for our household, ones we raised here and processed for a family pig class.
We were in
last week. And so I am just trying to manage the largesse, all of that, funnel it to various avenues to make it edible. And so I'm making brines, grinding meat, sausaging, all the while wondering what I'm going to do with all of it as I'm doing things with it. Mm-hmm. It's the burden of abundance. And there's too many options. And that is a curse and a blessing.
Yeah.
I have no, received tradition in the Pacific Northwest like, this is what you do with a pig. You're going to make morcilla with the blood, and that has a recipe. You're going to make prosciuttos with the legs, and that has a recipe. It's very much, we could kind of do all the things from all the countries and all the traditions, especially since we can recreate their climactic conditions in walk-ins and refrigerators. So what do we pick? So
yeah,
especially I'm trying to be docile to the limitations to let that guide what we do with our pig, I guess.
Well, being in the Pacific Northwest, if you think about it geographically and historically, we're sort of the final frontier, or maybe up into Canada would be. Mm-hmm. But as far as our culture, no one was raising pigs here before the white man came. Yeah. Right? They were fishing and preserving that meat, but...
It'd be interesting to know if the pig did make it up here even before the Europeans, because the pig was released...
Oh. Okay. Sorry.
Along with the children. They released the pigs and the children in Florida, and then they quickly deforested the entire continent. Pigs, children, axes, and fire. Forces to be reckoned with. But it will be interesting to see. I know that, and I keep forgetting to look this up, but Fort Nisqually in Vancouver, but I think it would be Vancouver, Washington area, southern Washington, was I might even have that wrong, but it was the Hudson Bay Trading Company outpost. And just one tiny archive of early European settler food-making traditions and methods. Hudson Bay Company being British, I'm sure they did lots of British methods. And they had pigs that were just free-ranging. But I wonder if the pigs did make it up here from Andrea del Soto, who released them in Florida in 15-something. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if his pigs made it all the way here before the Hudson Bay Company at Fort Nisqually was doing it for livestock. Because they spread fast, and pigs were one of the primary forces of conquering, really, this entire continent.
We should
all
ask
the way to the West Coast.
Our good friend Jim Lauderdale to come on the podcast with us and talk about it.
Yeah, that would be fun.
Fort Nisqually. It's
Yeah.
right over the water from us. We visited. They have a living history museum.
Yeah.
And he's a history buff / geek, just like we are. And only he actually knows stuff about this region. And maybe he knows some of the food culture.
I'm sure he does, yeah. 'Cause he kind of runs that place.
Right.
And that was his training, even, I think, in graduate school, was reconstructive living museum type of stuff, which is so cool. That's such a great way to do history, is to actually do history.
Exactly.
It's so fun.
Yeah.
That's what I like to do with bacon, is to do it the old way.
Sure. Sort of like Tales from the Green Valley, if you're familiar with that series. That's a fun historical series to follow. They're on YouTube.
Yeah.
They actually have several manifestations of their
Edwardian farm.
the Victorian farm.
Yeah.
And they dress up and they do it.
And they live for 1 calendar year using agricultural methods appropriate to the time. Even breeds, livestock breeds.
Yeah.
It's pretty neat.
The whole thing. It's a bunch of academics too, so it's kind of funny to watch them flounder a little, but they're doing it, so props to them.
Yeah, it's kind of a weird thing to reconstruct old recipes, because historical documents are full of gaps where you have to, fill in the blank, kind of. Things are just left unsaid because they were common knowledge then, and now they have completely vanished from our common depository of knowledge. And so the only way to get those missing gaps back from the literary record of history is to do the things.
Yeah.
You actually do them, and then you find out, oh, that's why they used that particular preposition in this recipe, It didn't make sense until I actually did it, and I realized, oh, that's a whole different deal. It requires... And a lot of those things just come to light because of the things that we do actually have in common with people from the past, like our bodies, and gravity, and the places where we might reenact those ancient recipes, fat pigs. And those elements actually in the present tell you so much more about what they did than the letter can ever really achieve. The letter is a good starting point. But it's really fun. Yeah. Well, thought I'd bring that up because I don't know if I actually did bring it up or not, but I'm glad it came up because we're going to be talking about smoking today. Yeah. And smoking, I know smoking itself, smoking meat, is geographically suited to this region. Yes. I don't know about pigs, but certainly to the native peoples and fish, And so there's a reason why it works well here. And smoking salmon. Yeah, there's so many reasons to smoke, but if you're going for terroir, which we talk about a lot. Yeah. If you're going for culinary preparations that work well in your region. Yeah. Smoking is one of them, and we're in smoking season right now, so I thought, actually collectively we thought it would be a good topic to talk about today. Yeah. So how do we enter into this? Get into smoking? Yeah, it's a huge topic. Well, I think it's very appropriate to this region because one of the elements pre-refrigeration, pre the widespread use thereof, of meat curing is preservation. I mean, that's not one of the elements. That is the element. Like we cured meat to preserve it. It wasn't just flavoring. And one of the key elements of preservation is drying meat. And you can imagine it's actually tricky to dry meat in northerly climes where we live, Northern Europe. Mm-hmm. It's difficult. Around the Mediterranean where there's a constant light breeze. And but still sort of balmy humidity, but not enough to make things spoil. There's no traditions of smoking. None, or very few. In fact, off the top of my head, I can't think of one Italian cured meat that is smoked. They just don't do it because it wasn't a practical necessity to dry out their meat. It dried out all by itself in the climate of the Mediterranean. So it just wasn't necessary. But then you get north, and things get colder, and they get wetter, and the humidity and the weather is more volatile. Like we get lots of changes, drastic throughout the seasons in terms of temperature and humidity fluctuations. And so we actually had to create a separate place where we could successfully and semi-controlled manner dry out our meat to preserve it. And that's what the smokehouse is. Because if you think about it, you can't dry out meat that's frozen rock hard. It doesn't dry out. It's frozen. All the water is locked in the meat. And drying is just the, escape of water from flesh. So if it's too cold, you're not drying meat. And then if it's really wet outside, you're also not drying meat. And so you create a place where you can use fire to both warm up from the freezing temperatures and remove moisture. And fire does both of those things. It provides heat and it lowers the ambient humidity. And it's just genius. And so smoking in the northern hemisphere, farther north, is very much just essential.
Well, it makes sense too, because you have cultures, let's say British cultures, that we emulate quite often, just naturally, and also because we're inclined, where our tastes, our palates, are inclined there.
Yeah.
But they have fireplaces that warm the house, and they also that's where you store the meat
Also
inside the chimney, right? So
yeah, the inglenook used to be like the smokehouse and the open fire cookery and the warming oven to revive, almost dead kittens and livestock. Like it was just everything.
Yeah.
It was a walk-in fireplace where you could do so much. Build fires right on the floor in bread ovens, and then more nooks further up where you could hang meat.
I mean, you can make a whole domestic culture around, the hearth.
Yeah.
So smoking is part of that hearth. Part of, and at hearth, I mean like the center of the home, in just the most cozy, warm feeling that you can think of. Smoking can be very much part of the center of the family, really.
Yeah, built around the fire.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it tastes real well. And I think that is no accident. I think that, it's always interesting to think of what came first. And we tend to believe that it's the utilitarian drive that starts all the things that we do. All of the refined cultural arts began as practical necessities. So smoking would be a prime example of that. It's too cold and too moist for the meat to dry. So eventually it's just going to rot. Therefore, we must smoke it. We must put it closer to the fire that we've been using to warm ourselves. And we do that long enough, and then we grow accustomed to it. And then we build whole generations on eating smoked meat. And now it is the icon of comfort food. And it has completely transcended its pure survival purposes to this realm of a highly refined art. And I just think that's an interesting play, and I would wonder to see, because humans are weirdos. We're weird. We think about survival and opulence like in the same breath. We think about thrift and extravagance simultaneously.
Yeah.
And even animals do this. Like if you're chasing, which I highly discommend, don't ever do this. If you're chasing livestock, it's not, if you get yourself in a position where you're doing a slaughter and the sheep are running and the farmer did not pen them. And so you're running like a moron to catch the sheep that you're supposed to slaughter. I can only imagine what this is like. I've never done it. Not really. It's funny because you could be chasing them. You are the wolf at that point.
Yeah.
If you're chasing sheep, you are death. That is what you mean to the sheep, and they are fleeing for their lives. Nonetheless, the moment they get up beyond their flight distance from you, they just start grazing. And then you get a little closer, and they run again, and they're we're gonna die.
Yeah.
And then they're 50 yards away, and they start grazing immediately. It's so funny. Herding animals, especially, are that way, and so they can just switch immediately from flight to preserve life to grass. Let's eat, just instantly in a moment. And so I wonder how hard and fast that distinction between survival and thrival, it's not a word, but really is, between thrift and extravagance.
Yeah.
If there wasn't some creative impulse towards, this make the meat keep well, but gee, it also tastes real nice. I mean, they had to notice that right away.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's what comes first?
Right.
I guess that's the ancient question. So this is technically the oldest philosophical question there is is it the form or the content?
Sure.
Is it the essence or the existence?
Yeah. Well,
never mind.
I'm always looking for examples of this where physical activity of any kind is both good for the body and good for the soul simultaneously.
Yeah.
And they are inseparable, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, anything. You take a sport, a culinary activity, some sort of industry, you can find meaning there for both your spirit and your body. And I love learning those activities.
Yeah, well, it's also smoking, you think about it, is direct. That used to be, at the very least, our bridge to the divine, in a way.
Exactly. Like incense.
I didn't even think about this, but
there's a whole liturgy.
Rising. Okay, smoke rising from the altar in ancient cultures was kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
That was not a small thing.
Yeah, it's how you enter into transcendence.
Yeah. And our oldest myths, I mean, it's how do you connect with the will of the universe, the ordering of the universe, other than burning a bunch of meat, cooking meat, and it's specific attention to the fact that the smoke rises, goes upward, lifts your head up, and that it smells good to the divinity. All right?
So there's got to be a draft.
So we wouldn't think that it smells good to God unless it smelled good to us.
Right.
Right at the very beginning.
Yes, and I'll just say real quick, because I was a theology major, and so I love to geek out over this kind of stuff, but grew up my whole life learning these stories.
Yeah.
And I had no idea. It was never told me, because maybe my teachers didn't know, that the sacrifices in the Old Testament, let's say, were actually they were meals.
Yeah.
I thought they were just like chunking pieces of meat and like, okay, that's wasted. And
few were the Holocaust offerings, which are completely torched.
Right.
They're burnt, gone.
Okay.
But there's just a few of those.
Okay.
Yeah.
But the majority, let's say, and that's not to say that there weren't good meanings for the torched ones, but the majority were community meals.
Well, the whole priestly caste survived off of that was their food.
Right.
Because they were so busy with the liturgy, they didn't have the luxury or the time to grow their own livestock.
Okay.
So they're totally dependent upon the community.
They needed that gift. Yeah.
Because they were serving the temple constantly.
Right.
As a whole sect. And so
But they were feeding, in some ways, they were the butchers too, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
They were the ones that, it wasn't maybe so much the common man that would kill their own animals.
Yeah.
A lot of times it was the priest's duty too.
Yeah, he would deliver the kill. They still forced the connection with the people. Like at least the I think it's the Passover lamb. You're supposed to put your hand on the forehead of the sheep as its throat is cut. Whew. Intense. We're so divorced from that. We're so milquetoast now compared to that. Such an encounter. But that reminds me, someone wrote, smoking and drinking go hand in hand. That they do, and I dare say they always have, because not only do you have smoke offerings, wave offerings, where you would wave the smoke even. Those are all part of these ancient rites. They also had libation offerings where you pour out oil or wine. Because someone says smoking and drinking go hand in hand, and I was
That's exactly
trying
right.
to make that connection.
Yeah.
It's very true. They do.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that those are all, it was always things of value. You know, I'm not going to offer a sacrifice that cost me nothing, as King David said that. That was a big deal, because someone just wanted to give him a bull to offer. And he's like, no, the point is, it's a sacrifice. It costs me something. There's nothing more costly in an ancient culture than oil and meat.
Animal flesh.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah, and then you think, well, the smoke is valuable too. And that's exactly the thing that is rising up.
And in modern day, you connect the incense, say that you're burning in a temple or something, with your prayers.
Yeah.
You can't, it's not just empty.
Yeah.
There's meaning attached to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, smoking meat's kind of a big deal.
Yeah. We're kind of stumbling into that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We can't really limit its meaning. You know, it's savory to us on many levels.
Yeah.
Many, many levels.
Well, think about everything from barbecue. Like, every culture has their barbecue. And the highlight of any gathering, especially like in the winter in the Northern Hemisphere, is you build a fire and you stand around it. Even if you're not going to burn anything, you're burning wood. Yeah. Yeah, and that gathering does something to a group of people.
Yeah, I've even heard it said, you know, we have the gaze now that you see, the sickly or pallid, wide-eyed gaze at a moving screen. Yeah. That it seems irresistibly inscribed in our brain chemistry to be mesmerized by a moving screen, whether it's an iPhone or a computer or a television, you know, back in the old days. And I'm sure I've heard people say this too, that's just from looking at fires.
Exactly.
We're the people that look at fires.
Yeah.
And we are mesmerized by them.
That helps elevate our thoughts of what's going on in our spirits.
Yeah, it's like it shuts down the busy part of our brain or something. Unless it's a phone, in which case it's like a trick. Yeah. It actually triggers the busy, ceaseless searching, undiscerning, consumptive part of our brain, where we're just devouring information willy-nilly. Doesn't matter what it is.
It's a false representation.
It's not a sublime rest.
Yeah.
It's a harried race. It's weird. It's actually kind of tiring. Whereas I think looking at a fire, which does happen. It's, you know, you notice like around a campfire, it's not awkward when the conversation stops, right? It is awkward if there's no fire, maybe, you know, unless you're with good friends, but you're all standing around talking and then just suddenly it stops. And it's a little weird. We're all like shifting. But if there's a fire in the middle of everybody, no problem. Yeah. You don't even notice. It's not awkward at all. Yeah. Because there's your brain is still engaged. You're still in communion with each other, I think, around the fire.
Absolutely. How many people do you know you would say truly share your back to the land values? Or your passion for home-scale craft meat curing? Or simply love the multifaceted beauty of a good meal as obsessively as you do? Maybe a handful? At farmsteadmeatsmith.com, we've created an online community of hundreds of omnivores from around the world, and a platform for them to learn from and inspire one another. In addition to our major semi-annual hands-on educational event, The Family Pig, here at our Pacific Northwest homestead, over at farmsteadmeatsmith.com, we host a purely digital membership program with an archive of film and textual resources years deep now, for you to dive deeper into your food journey with. And both our classes and online program include access to our private community Facebook page for your continued education and fellowship. We've been told that our classes are life-changing and the membership program unparalleled in quality and quantity. To get a taste of our education, search farmsteadmeatsmith.com and our YouTube channel, for our free films, conversations, and downloads. Explore how we and other meatsmiths across the globe may best come alongside you, putting the knife in your hand, article by article, and comment thread by comment thread, and can support you in building your home around the harvest. Please head to farmsteadmeatsmith.com today. Why then, okay, besides all of that, so elevation of your own humanity, you know, but besides all that, what does it do to your meat? And why, I guess we'll just start there. So practically speaking, what does it do to the meat? And also, I guess, we can get into this, but different types of smoking and, you know, do you only smoke meat if it's already been salted, or does it depend on what you're, like, if you're trying to preserve the meat versus just flavor it? Or I know that usually they're both when it comes to you, but. Yeah,
well, that's kind of what Justin asked on our Facebook, on a Meatsmith table, because we actually stream these podcasts live on our membership Meatsmith group. And Justin was talking about what about brining before smoking? Is there what is your brine recipe? How long do you soak? Do you inject? Do you use pink salt? And I think and if so, you know, how much do I add? That kind of thing. I think the general question is, do you cure meat before smoking it? And the answer is yes. Yeah, unless you're cooking the meat during the smoking.
Got it. Okay.
Which is basically what long form barbecue is. Like, you see the big pit masters and their huge trailers with lots of barbecuing, smoking apparatus, and they call it smoking, but really it's a long, slow cook where in the oven chamber or the cooking chamber, the smoke is being trapped, and just the hotter the smoke, the more intense the smoky flavor. So those things don't need to be cured; they're being cooked. The smoking we're going to talk about today is for preservation and flavor. It's not cooking the meat. So we're going to talk about a cold/warm smoke that basically paints the outside of the meat with smoke and dries it out, both of which are preservative. And to that end, you do need to have the meat cured. It should be cured first. And I don't... you can do it with a brine or a dry salt, because Justin mentions brining or...
So we've done a whole episode on the whole muscle curing with dry salt.
Right.
I don't know if we've actually covered brining yet.
Not really.
Do you want to right now? Can we go do a little flyby review, or? Yeah,
we could. Yeah, I think that... So either one of those can be used for meat that you intend to smoke.
Yeah.
Brining, which is basically salt dissolved in water and then cooled, and then meat submerged therein for X amount of days, and then pulled out and smoked. So you can use brining or dry salting, which we talked about, applying dry salt to the surface of meat and then smoking it after it's done, after the salt has done its job of curing. Before you put either of those in the smoker, though, they do need to be dry on the exterior.
Yes.
And to achieve that, you just need to hang it in a dryish place. So, usually the salting or the brining happens under refrigeration, which is a rodent-free environment, and controlled temperature, which is very nice. You take it out of the brine or out of the salt. You can rinse off the dry salted meat if there's any salt rocks left there, and dry it off with towels. It's also a good idea even to do that with brined meat, to give it a tepid water rinse just real quick with the sink, because then all of the salt is concentrated on the exterior of the meat. And as you dry it out in the smoker, there's a chance that you could get salt rusting or scabbing, where the surface salt just on the surface of the meat accumulates into a super hard inedible salty crust. And to mitigate that, you can rinse even brined meat in tepid water and just kind of rub it and scrub it and rinse it and then dry it. And then you want to hang them both in a place where they are likely to dry on the surface of the meat. And so it's not like a thorough drying. It's just so the meat isn't glistening and dripping. You want to get beyond that point. They call it a pellicle, which is like, I don't know why we have to give it silly names. It's probably a real name. But where you look at the surface and you touch it, and it's not slippery, slick, and moist and glistening, you know. That usually only takes a couple days of hanging, either of brined or of dry cured meat.
Or you steal your wife's dehumidifier that lives in her bathroom where she bathes all her children because
Right.
the bathroom is constantly soaking. And
Yeah.
so to deter rottage and spoilage of our bathroom timbers, try to keep a dehumidifier in there. But you could
Yeah.
just steal it and put it in your butcher shop.
Right.
And that'll work.
Yes.
And that'll dehumidify things enough.
So get yourself a dehumidifier, and then you can, like, I hang the meat on this rail. Can't quite see it in the camera, but right above us, there's a meat rail. I hang it up there, and then there it is, right on that rail. And then I put the dehumidifier right below it, and it's blowing dryish air on that meat. And in one night, I can get a nice dry surface on all the meat, and then boom, in the smoker the very next day. So
Okay.
that's kind of nice.
It speeds it up.
Yeah, and you really want that dry surface on the meat before you put it in the smoker, because if it's wet and drippy in the smoker, it will attract the Stygian bitterness of the smoke, the acrid, gross, creosote-like, non-tasty stuff from the smoke. And it'll be slick and greased, almost like it's been, actually it will have creosote on it. You know, it's almost like someone took a piece of charcoal and dipped it in water and rubbed it all over the meat. It's kind of gross. So you don't want that. It's bitter, it's acrid. And that will happen if there's droplets still hanging onto the meat. So you want to really get it dry and then put it in the smoker. And rather than the Stygian bitterness, you will have the nutty, sweet contribution of smoke, which lowers the pH of the meat, by the way, and has antibacterial effect on the outside and dries it out. So it is all and antifungal. So it's all directly preservative. It's all really good preservative stuff. So cure the meat before you smoke it is the general answer to Justin's question. And I don't inject. I've never injected anything with brine until like last week, just because I wanted to try out the needle that I've had for a year. I didn't even smoke that piece. With whole muscle cures, bacon, ham, prosciutto, pancetta, lomo, lonzo, guanciale, you know, all the whole muscle stuff that you're curing, there's no need to inject. You just want to, before smoking, you just want to cure it, dry it, smoke it. Cool smoke. Cool, warmish smoke. Yeah. So.
Okay. Let's talk about the difference between cold and hot smoking.
Yeah.
That's people are going to wonder that, and I guess the main difference is the teleology of them. Are you going to eat it right away, or are you trying to preserve it?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, hot smoking is cooking with the addition of a smoky flavor. So you're cooking the meat. Cold smoked or warm smoked meat is not being cooked. The surface is drying out significantly, and it's going to deepen in its color, you know, from yellow to gold to brown, and get dark and smoky and tasty. And that is uncooked, still raw, but cured, because you've cured it before you put it in to the smoker. And that's what I've always done, is the cold smoke method. Always, always.
Is there a temperature range that you want to stay in? Not that you have a thermometer out there, but
no. Yeah, there's lots of guides, and you'll find it depends on when the cookbook was written as to what the temperature parameters of a cold smoke relative to a hot smoke are. But in general, I'm hoping it's staying before about or below 120 Fahrenheit, 120 degrees Fahrenheit. But honestly, I don't actually know. I don't know what the temperature of my smoker is. Never have. And generally, I want to keep it cool enough so that the dripping of fat does not occur. And that itself is not a universal temperature, because some pork will have more oily fat with a lower melting point. Other pork will have a more saturated fat with a higher melting point. And so you just kind of keep an eye on it. And if you're getting drips, dampen the fire. And that's all part of smokehouse management.
Okay.
And I think if I were to be scientific about it, I would classify my smoke as a warm smoke, which I should say is heavily derided with draconian warnings and grave images of death by every other cookbook to even consider a warm smoke. You know, it spends so long in the danger zone. And so much of that is the almost hallowed, like, liturgical respect that people give to botulism.
Right.
Like, it's so belts and braces that it's often beyond the facts of the case.
Yeah.
And it, maybe for good reason, particularly if you're starting with pork that is not very clean, so it's been distributed all over the country before you even get it. That is a more volatile, dangerous product. Whereas if it's from your backyard, you have a lot more control over that, and particularly the microbial business going on outside of the meat. And with whole muscle cures, I've never added nitrite or nitrate to meat because I intend to smoke it and I want it to be safe in my warm smoker, which, if I had to guess, never gets above 110 degrees Fahrenheit, I would say. But that is a pure guess. And I've smoked hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pounds that way. That's how all of our bacon, all of our smoked meat is had in our household. And the reason that it's that danger zone, right, in a warm smoker. And what is that? It's like basically body temperature, somewhere around body temperature, 98.6 up to 140 is the danger zone in food language.
Right.
And that is targeted at many bacteria, but the primary, actor that they're terrified of is the botulism. And the cool thing about a smoker that is hopefully, that is a backyard janky, kind of a rickety old shed smoker, is that it is not anaerobic. So that is the only condition wherein botulism can occur, is in an anaerobic environment where oxygen is not, where it is absent. And so I have a very drafty smoker where oxygen is. Consequently, botulism is impossible.
Okay.
Unless it is, I'm smoking a sausage.
Right.
And even there, it's only theoretically possible.
Okay.
So that is why there's this big, condemnation of a cold, well, even cold smoke. People, it's so sadistic. That's how you know it's silly, because there'll be big online blogosphere fads of the next big dangerous thing that only idiots do with their meat. And for a while there, it was cold smoking.
Oh, okay.
And warm smoking would not even be countenanced. 'Tis ridiculous.
Wow.
But with my smoker, I have oxygen in there, so I do not fear botulism at all. Not even a little bit. And I'll tell you, I kind of built it into the design of the smoker, which is, it's a little unique, I think. I've never actually really seen a smoker like ours before.
Yeah, tell us about it.
And I've pieced it together from other sources and traditions, because, again, I don't have one to draw from in the Pacific Northwest, so I go to Europe at about the same distance from the equator as we are, and you get around England and Northern Europe, Central Europe. And the British smokers are brick buildings, and the combustion happens in the chamber with the meat.
Okay.
Which is really cool. So it's not remote. It's not a wood-burning stove, 15 feet away with a pipe attached to it with a 2-foot rise to get your draft. You want it rise in elevation from the stove to the chamber, and then it comes out in an enclosed chamber. That's not the cool, moist weather way to smoke.
Okay. Where did that come from then? Why do people do that?
It is really an attempt. I think it really helps cool down the smoke.
Okay.
Because they don't want, if you live in a warm place, it's 95 degrees outside, you're not going to have a 75-degree smoke. Not going to happen.
Yeah.
Not going to happen. Just because the ambient temperature is very high. And so there's lots of focus on keeping that smoke really, really cold. Really, really, really cold. And
so it's like a hedge against making it too hot. But you're saying you don't need to. Just put the fire in the...
I think so. Yeah. Well, and the only... So what having the fire in the same chamber as the meat is that it dries out the chamber of the meat.
Ah, that's right.
It's consuming moisture, which is great because you want the meat to be dryish. It is possible that in northern climates where it's moist, heavy temperature fluctuation, and cold, that you will get condensation on the meat if your smoke is piped in from a distant fire.
Well, you even experienced that, right?
I did. That is why I can say it is possible. Yeah.
That was model 1 of our
fourth
generation
2.5. Yeah. That was. It was. I attempted that and immediately got condensation all over the meat. And it was probably the time of year, but I kind of want to be able to smoke all the time. So that was kind of a no-go for that system for me.
Yeah.
A remote wood-burning stove with smoke piped in. So northern cool climes, I don't think that works. And lo and behold, when you look at European tried and true designs of the same, in areas of the similar climate, combustion is occurring where the meat is. And that has two effects. One is it dries out the meat.
Right.
And the other is it consumes the oxygen in the chamber. So there is the possibility of an anaerobic environment again. This is why I have added ventilation to my smokehouse.
Yes.
And so all along the bottom 34 inches or so of my smokehouse is screen, like window screen. It's completely, has access along the entire, all, I guess, 3 walls of the bottom dimension of my smokehouse. There's no chimney. It's completely trapped above, the smoke is. And so what it does is the smoke rises and it builds up to the ceiling and then it stacks upside down all the way down to where it vents out the screens. And what this means is that I am providing oxygen from outside the chamber for the fire. And while the fire is inside the meat chamber, it is also inside a Weber barbecue. So it is still getting the benefits of drying out the interior of the smoker without having like open flame in the smokehouse. And it means I can control the burn rate so much better than if I just built a fire on the ground, right? I can really control the burn rate of the smoker in the Weber barbecue, and I keep coming back to the Weber.
I know.
I can't get. It's such a good little tool. It's this little ball with vents on the bottom and vents on the top, which means I have absolute control over the draft and the burn rate. So I can lock in a smoke such that I do not have to stoke that thing but 3 times in a day. And that's like a long day of smoking. That's at least 12 hours. It'll get me. And so the combination of having that ventilation on the bottom, but still the combustion occurring in the chamber of the meat, where the meat is, in a Weber, is just, it's perfect. It works so well for this area, and I get a consistent smoke every time. I like to smoke bacon about 2 days, and hams and hocks about 3, which is a little shorter, and that is because it is a warmer smoke. It's just a little warmer. And I would argue that it's not necessarily a warmth, again, that translates to the chamber of the meat. This is kind of a fine point, but it's really interesting because the warmer the smoke, the quicker the smoking happens. But that doesn't mean that the chamber where the meat is actually has to be hot or warm. It is the combustion. You want a higher rate of combustion. So it's actually a lot of heat that is consuming the fuel, which is wood. And that is the kind of smoke you want on your meat. It's blue. It's not vast plumes of white smoke, if you know what I mean. So blue smoke is the result of more heat happening in the combustion, and that is the tasty smoke. And because that heat is in the Weber, it's not, completely dispersed throughout or it's not heating up the chamber where the meat is as much.
Right.
Because the combustion is very much concentrated in the Weber.
Right.
Or it is totally. And so that smoke is the result of a pretty significant bed of glowing red embers on which I throughout the day, maybe 2 or 3 times, place green wood. Not green. I mean, it's dried, but I place fresh pieces of fresh logs. And those hot embers stay pretty hot all day, and they burn the wood at a rate that gives me a nice blue smoke rather than plumes of white smoke. And white smoke, it's too cool and it takes too long.
Okay.
Technically, for me, it takes too long.
Right.
I mean, it'll probably do it, but I think you're talking rather than 2 or 3 days of smoke, you're like 7 to 12.
Oh, wow.
And that's much more work. That's a lot of feeding and keeping the meat in there for quite a while. So that's a lot of detail, but that's kind of the smoker that I have landed on, and it's really good. I'm developing a really nice aromatic layer of creosote on the walls in the smokehouse. Right. And it smells so good in there. It's incredible. But the walls is all wood, so this is the one weak spot of my smoker, because creosote's real flammable. And
gosh. You're telling me this now. Yeah. Okay.
So someday I do need to I want to build a masonry smoker, but with the similar ventilation all the way along the bottom dimension, and it's going to have a Weber barbecue in it.
Yeah.
Unless someone designs an even better chamber, which I doubt the possibility of. And basically, I take the legs off the Weber so it can sit closer to the ground, and it sits on cinder blocks, so there's still some space between the Weber and the ground to permit free flow of draft.
And to prevent fire.
I have a stock bubbling over there. That's what that sound is.
I thought that was the rain.
I thought it was the rain.
Did we hit rolling boil?
Yeah, it's okay. We'll call it a ramen stock.
There we go. So we have a janky smoker, but functionally it's nice.
Perfect.
Yeah. It has the screens sort of stapled along the bottom.
Yeah.
And
high tech.
The Weber inside, and it's just a wood shed. It's where our previous the owners of the home built it. And it was a wood shed. But it even ventilates up along the roof too. It's not airtight even on the top.
Yeah, I kind of tried to make it airtight, but
to sort of capture the smoke in there.
Smoke finds a way.
Yeah.
I use flue tape around a lot of the top seams, but it's just plywood, and so you want a low roof You want the roof to be right above the smoking meat, because if you have a peak to your roof and the rods are down below, say at the tops of the walls, and that's where the meat is hanging, all the smoke's going to gather in the peak.
Yeah.
So you actually want a flat roof, or one canted for runoff, for shedding water, and then the meat just right below that.
Yeah.
Because the smoke obviously rises, and it'll hang out up there.
This conversation will be continued in a forthcoming Part 2 episode. Thanks for listening, and peace be with you.